You know, we're gonna let Tommy handle it tonight.
That's tough to follow. Hearing all those testimonies and words of praise, and man, that's good. That's good stuff. Well, over the past several weeks, maybe a couple of months, Pastor Jason's been having Q&A, question and answer sessions, where you guys get to ask him questions, right? And he's been giving the answers. Well, I'll be the first one to admit I'm not as smart as Pastor Jason, so y'all ain't gonna get to ask me nothing tonight. I get to ask you stuff. We're going to flip the tables a little bit tonight. Okay, and I'm going to ask you questions. Now, the questions I'm going to ask you are not going to be, unless you want to just speak up, they're going to be more for you to do a self-reflection and answer in your heart and answer where you're at on these. You know, over the past month, I guess it's been, I've had a lot of time to think and reflect about the heart. My mother-in-law had a pacemaker put in about a month ago, I guess it was now. And then a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were getting ready to go out of town, and her sister actually had a heart attack and ended up getting 3 stents. So over the last month, I've thought about the heart a lot. And then I started thinking about the similarities really between the physical heart and the spiritual heart. You know, the physical heart is what pumps blood and really pumps life into every organ in your body. So the heart, the physical heart, really supplies life to those organs and supplies life to you. Okay? The spiritual heart is very much the same thing. The spiritual heart is what pumps life into you. As a matter of fact, listen to this. Solomon tells us in the book of Proverbs in chapter 4, verse 23, says, "Keep your heart with diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." Keep your heart with diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Now, of course, here he's talking about the spiritual heart and not the physical heart. Okay? And inside that physical heart, basically he's talking about the inner life. That inner life inside of you, which is inclusive of intellect, emotion, will, desires, passions, thoughts, and understanding. So really everything you think and do is driven through your heart. And you know, for so long, it's always been, I've always thought it was the mind that really controlled your thoughts and actions, but it's really the understanding and the matter of the heart. So I want you to notice the importance of keeping or guarding your heart in this Proverbs. It says, with all diligence. With all diligence. That means everything that's inside of you is really declaring the urgency to guard your heart. Why is it important to guard your heart? Well, the last part of that verse says, for out of it are the issues of life. Or in other words, what Solomon is saying here is that a person is made or broken by what transpires within the heart. A person is made or broken by what transpires in the heart. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this quote. He once said that the heart of the matter is the matter of the heart. At the heart of the matter is the matter of the heart. Or put it in biblical terms, Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. So tonight I'm going to use the word heart, and I'm going to do an acrostic, and we're going to pick out each letter, and we're going to go through and talk about that particular area, and I'm going to ask you to do a self-reflection. How are you doing in the area of these? Okay, so let's start with the H. Start with the H. And let's talk about habits. Let's talk about habits. What is a habit? What's a habit? What do y'all think? Something you do over and over. Matter of fact, the definition I've often heard of a habit is you have to do something 15 consecutive times. Do it over and over 15 times for it to become a habit. So here's what I want you to ask yourself tonight. Do your habits reflect Christ, reflect self, or reflect the world? Okay, in a random poll that was recently conducted, people all across the U.S. were asked a couple of questions. Question number 1 was, what good habits do you see in people that call themselves followers of Christ? What good habits do you see in people that call themselves followers of Christ? All right, let's talk about the top 5 good habits, followers of Christ. This is what people see or people say that Christians demonstrate. Number 1, helping the poor. That's a good habit, right? Helping the poor is a good habit. Number 2, feeding the hungry. That's a good habit. Number 3, caring for the sick. We talked about healing earlier. Caring for the sick. Number 4, fighting for justice and what they believe. And then finally, number 5, uplifting the downtrodden. So those are the top 5 good habits that people, when they were polled, said that they see Christians demonstrating. The other question they were asked was this: what bad habits do you see in people that call themselves followers of Christ? Let's talk about the top 5 there. Any guesses? What's that? Gossip? Lying? Judgmental. Number 1 on the list. Too judgmental. Too judgmental. Number 2 on the list. Post garbage on social media. Whether it's and they ask them to explain further. And they said they either post offensive political stuff, self-righteous condemnations, bitter theological rants, or out of context Bible excerpts. Okay? Number 3, hypocrites. Hypocrites. Basically, they lie and cheat as much as non-Christians. So basically, when they're not in church on Sundays, they're acting just like everyone else. Number 4, they're bitter and cynical about life. Who should be the happiest people in the world? We should be. The joy of the Lord. But yet, this is a random poll that was conducted about what they see, the bad habits they see, in people who call themselves Christians. And number 5, any of you ever worked in a restaurant? Okay, guess what number 5 is? Poor tippers. That's exactly right. Poor tippers. That's right. Oh, so Pastor Jason said poor tipper probably reflects a poor tither as well. Wow, so as Christians, shouldn't we trust God more than anyone else? So therefore, the more we give away, the more we usually get, right? That's the parable of the reaper and sower, right? Okay. So those are the 5 bad habits that non-Christians saw that Christians have. So question number 1 for you to ask for yourself, or you can answer it out loud if you want to. How many of the good habits do you reflect? And how many of the bad habits do you have? How many of those 5 good habits do you have? How many of those 5 bad habits do you have? If you have more of the 5 bad habits than you do the 5 good habits, see Pastor Jason after service. All right. How'd everybody do on that question? Everybody pass? Yeah? Pastor Jason, you must be not only smarter than me, but stronger than me. This cap right here, man, I'm leaving that thing off. So the E, let's talk about the E. Any guesses here? Let's talk about ethics. Let's talk about ethics. So what are your ethics? The definition of ethics is moral principles that govern a person's behavior or activity. So how are your ethics? What is your character? Notice I didn't ask you what your reputation is. There's a big difference. Your reputation is what others think you are, who others think you are. Your character is who God knows you are, because He knows your heart. So what is your character? Matthew 12:35 says, a good man with a good heart brings forth good treasures, and an evil man with a bad heart brings forth bad treasures. So what are your ethics? Are you honest in your dealings with others? Do you reflect Christ's heart with being no respecter of persons? And what I mean there is, do you treat everyone the same, with the same dignity and respect, no matter who they are or what they are? Do you have integrity? How is your work ethic? Are you accountable for your actions? Do you blame others? How do you conduct yourself when no one is watching? How do you conduct yourself when no one is watching? Because that's who you truly are. That's who you truly are. It's easy to be good in church, y'all. It's easy to be good in church. But how do you conduct yourself when no one is watching? So how'd you do on that one? Anyone want to tell me their score under ethics? Everybody made above a 70, right? Had to make above 70 to pass it. Anybody in here make less than 70? Denise, put your hand down. Just kidding. All right. So let's go on. A, what do you think A is? Attitude. Ding, ding, ding. And look what happens. See, if you leave the lid off, it no longer writes. Let's get this one. Attitude. I'm about to get an attitude with these markers. Attitude. How's your attitude? You know, probably the biggest quote or saying about attitude comes from Chuck Swindoll, right? Everybody's probably heard it, but let me read it to you just again, just in case. It says, attitude. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. Attitude is more important than appearances, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for the day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. Everyone in here is in charge of your attitude. So how's your attitude? Does it change and shift with the wind? Does it rise and fall with the tide? Does it go backward and forward with the time changes? Man, I'm so ill this time of year. Anybody else in here ill this time of year? Man, the time changes, it gets dark, I get ill. It shouldn't change my attitude. I'm going to have to work on that. Y'all pray for me about that. Okay? But our attitude shouldn't change. Listen, remember, we are tasked each day to grow to be more like Christ, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Be more like Christ. Okay? So if we become more Christ-like, Christ was the same yesterday, today, and forever. His attitude is not changed by who is or isn't president, what the stock market is doing, what people are posting on Facebook, or who has the biggest house. Attitude is the flaps on your personal plane that most affects your altitude. Let me say that again. I thought that was pretty clever. I come up with that. Attitude is the flaps on your personal plane that most affects your altitude. In other words, your attitude is going to help determine how high you go, how high you rise. So how about you? Do you have an attitude of gratitude or an attitude of hatitude? Don't be a hater. Don't be a hater. Don't be a hater. We don't want haters at Rejuvenate. Okay? You can hate Satan. That's the only person you can hate. I don't think you can hate. All right, you can hate Satan, but we don't want haters. All right, now for the R. What do you think the R is? Responsibility. That's not the one I chose, but you want to speak to responsibility? It don't matter. You're the preacher. All right. Huh? Reaction? That would have been a good one too. Respect? How about this one? All those are good, by the way. I should have chose some of those because some of those are better than mine. How about relationships? How about relationships? Let's talk about relationships. You got that one right? Oh, my wife got that one right. You cheated. You read my notes. She's one of those people we need to work on these ethics right here. Just kidding. All right. Relationships. Definition of relationship is the state of being connected. State of being connected. Okay? So with that definition in mind, how's your relationship with Christ? Are you in a state of being connected? Any of you ever been in a one-sided relationship? Whether it's friendship or anything. You ever been in a one-sided relationship? God, isn't that exhausting? Man, you do all the work. There's no give and take. It's either give and give or take and take. Man, that will wear you out. Wonder how many times we wear out God because he's in a one-sided relationship with us. Ask yourself that question. Relationships should never be one-sided, and certainly our relationship with God shouldn't be one-sided. You know, that's the problem for too long that has plagued our churches, is that they feel like their relationship with God is God doing things for them and them not doing anything for God. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. It's a two-sided relationship. Should be hearers and doers of the word, right? We should have a relationship with Christ. So how are you upholding your end of the relationship you're in with others? How about this one? Your relationship with yourself. Your relationship with yourself. How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel? Do you hate yourself? Do you hate your body? Do you hate your hair color? Do you hate the fact you don't have any hair? God created us. He didn't make any mistakes. So, don't hate yourself. Don't be a hater. Relationships are important. And finally, the T. Any idea what T stands for? Yeah, come on. Give me some guesses. Oh, I got the wrong one again, didn't I? Give me some guesses on T. Time. Ding, 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 ding. You nailed it. Time. Time. You know, it's often been said you can tell a lot about a person if you look at the ledger in their checkbook and see what they're spending their money on. Now, see, I think you can tell a lot about a person because since time is our most precious commodity, I think you can tell a lot about a person by how they spend their time. How they spend their time. How about you? If you had to keep a little record or a timesheet of how you spend your time, would you be ashamed to let other people see it? What do you devote your time to? Do you devote more time to building up others or tearing down others? Do you devote more time in gaining wealth than you do in helping others? Do you devote more time on your hobbies than you do on your children? Do you devote more time on things of pleasure than you do on building up treasures in heaven? Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with working. We all need to work, and there's nothing wrong with having hobbies, and there's nothing wrong with having fun. We all need those things in our life, but they need to be balanced. They need to be balanced. Nothing, nothing nothing should ever rob time from God. Nothing should ever rob time from God. So why is it urgent for us to guard our hearts? Because they're the very inner workings of our life depends on it. The very inner workings of our life depends on it. I remember when I was playing football, I'm not as smart as Pastor Jason, and I wasn't near as good a football player as Pastor Jason, okay? But I did play the same position. I played cornerback, okay, defensive back. And I remember my defensive football coach telling me, because I wasn't the biggest person in the world, my senior in high school, I was 5'8", 135 pounds. That doesn't make for a very good football player. So I remember my defensive back telling me that always, when somebody's coming at you running the ball, always keep your eye on their waist. Because see, they can give you head fakes and they can juke their legs, but their waist area is always going to go the direction they're actually headed. You can't move your waist. You go this way, your waist's going with you. You can't fake your waist this way and you go that way. They can in cartoons, but in real life you can't. So he told me to always make sure that I kept my eyes on the stomach. And it would always tell me what way they were doing. We need to always keep our eyes on our inner working. There's a lot of people that will try to give you fake and jukes and make you think they're Christians on the outside. You can't. What's the word I'm looking for? Fool God. You can't fool God. He knows your inner workings. He knows your inside. But you'll run into a lot of people that have outwardly characteristics that are Christians, but their inwardly characteristics do not reflect Christ at all. Matter of fact, I'm going to give you a few attributes of someone, and I want you to tell me if you can guess who this individual is. Okay? Used the Christian vocabulary very well, talked about the blessings of the Almighty, talked about how Christian confessions would become the pillars of the new government, and he showed his tattered Bible every chance he got and declared that he drew his strength from it. Who do you think I'm talking about there? Any guesses? Come on. The first two again. He used the Christian vocabulary very well. He could talk like a Christian. He talked about the blessings of the Almighty. He talked about how Christian confessions would become the pillars of the new government. And he showed his tattered Bible and declared that he drew strength from it. Who? Jim Jones. You're not far off. No? What do you think? Would you be shocked if I told you Adolf Hitler demonstrated every one of those characteristics? He was a master of religiosity with no inward reality of God. In other words, his heart didn't have it. His heart didn't have it. So that's where your life really tells a story, is in its heart. That's where it tells its story. As a matter of fact, those of you that are follow sports, there's a saying, I follow recruiting pretty closely. There's a saying that, and unlike Pastor Jason, my recruiting, when they came to recruit me, it was Anderson University, sign here and we'll give you $600 to come play baseball for us. So it wasn't getting all these hats and making all these trips everywhere. So I follow recruiting pretty closely. And one pitch on the recruiting trail is watch what they do, not what they say. Because they're going, whatever school they just visited, They're going to talk about that school like it's the best school they've ever been to. But watch what they do and not what they say. That same idiom would hold true for Christians. Watch what they do, not what they say. It's very easy to talk a good game. Listen, I can talk as good a golf game as Tiger Woods. I can tell you how you should stand, how you should address the ball, like hello ball. No, that not that kind of. How you should address the ball, what you should wear, what club you should use. Man, I can tell you what to do on the golf course. Don't watch me play. It don't take long for you to figure out, man, that guy's not very good. Or don't take you long to figure out, man, that guy's really bad. I would be happy with not very good. I'm really bad. So don't watch what people say. Watch what they do. Watch what they do. Guard your heart with urgency. Guard your heart with urgency. You only have one of them. And I'm not talking about your physical heart. You only have one spiritual heart. You only have one soul. And the decisions you make now are going to determine where that soul goes. Guard your heart. I hear a lot of people say that Satan is after people's minds. And it's true. Satan will play mind games with you. He'll get in your mind and he'll want you to think stuff and all that. But if he just gets your mind and doesn't get your heart or your soul, then he loses. He's after your heart. Guard it with urgency, whatever it takes. Sessions one that we teach in Connections class, one of the questions on there, one of the answers to one of the questions on there is, do whatever it takes. So as Christians, we need to do whatever it takes to guard our heart and to prepare our heart. So don't forget about this. So hopefully everyone scored 100 on habits. Anybody score less than 100 on habits? Ain't nobody raise their hand. We got problems with ethics in here. We got people not telling the truth. How'd you do on ethics? Good? Well, Tanya said she did good. And Scotty's back here laughing. What you laughing about, Scotty? Huh? Okay. Attitude. To me, this is the big one. This is the big one. Listen, why would anybody want to hang around somebody that's a sourpuss? And if that's the attitude that Christians are demonstrating, why in the world would anybody want anything to do with this person we're calling God and we're miserable? Attitude. Relationships. That relationships can really stretch out across a bunch of things. And Pastor Jason's dying to talk about responsibility, and I'm going to let him in just a minute. He's been down there flipping through his Bible, looking at scriptures. So I'm going to let him talk about responsibility in just a minute. And then time. You can tell more by a person on what they're spending their time on than anything. And you know what? You can spend your time doing good things and rob God. You can spend your time doing good things and rob God. So guard your heart, guard your habits, guard your ethics, guard your attitude, guard your relationships, and guard your time. Because none of it is really yours anyway. It's all His. It's all His. We're just passing through. We're just stewards, okay, of this city that He's given us. So guard it. Guard it. All right, I'm going to give them out to Pastor Jason because he had something he wanted to say. Hang on a second.
No, really, I do. I want to share something. Y'all mind? Can I take a minute? So, ironically enough, God, as I was listening, it was kind of one thing in each of those things that really struck me that I wanted to share. So if I can go back through the acrostic a little bit. Tommy talked about habits, and he asked the questions about, what were the things that people talked about that were habits of good Christians, bad habits of bad Christians. If I'm not mistaken, the number one bad habit was judgment. Am I correct about that? And so God really just led me because I think there is a great misconception about judgment in the church, and I want to be sure that we kind of clarify that a little bit. And so I want you to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 real quick, if you will, because I think here's what happens in our day and age now. The judgment that's being talked about in this sense is a judgment that is carried and passed without a lifestyle that can back up the decree. And so what I mean by that is that the judgment that's being referred to, I think, in this question, or in the hypocrisy that was stated by these people, is Christians who are judgmental, but they have no lifestyle that can carry the weight of the judge. Are we all right with that? I'm sorry, 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Because how many of you guys at any point in your life have ever been in some kind of a heated conversation with somebody, and you were accused of being judgmental and self-righteous, and so maybe at some point, you were doing so out of a bad place, and they were correct. But how many of you know that you were in the situations, or some of the situations that you were in, that happened, that you were doing things or saying things according to the word of the Lord that you also yourself try to live by, and trying to bring to light, an issue in a brother or a sister's life, whether it be blood family or Christian family or whatever, and they really, because of their their conviction, or because of their realization of what they're doing, is they lash back at you because they don't have the responsibility to lash back at themselves. Essentially, you guys have been in that place before. And so here's something that always, so we've all been at some point by somebody been taught before in some kind of a heated discussion, well, quit judging me, right? We've all been there. Has everybody been there? We've all been there. I've been there. I feel like I get it an awful lot sometimes from people, but you just quit judging me or whatever, and then we get thrown the phrase sometimes, the scripture that says that, judge not lest you be judged, and they use that against us too, and it's like the only scripture they can come up with in a moment. Here's one thing I think it's important for us to understand, is that God created you and I to have dominion. We became the voices of the earth. Through his authority, through his spirit, through his delegated authority, we became the voices of the earth. And we were given that dominion not to operate outside of his spirit, but by his spirit. All right, which means that if we live according to his spirit, we were granted that authority within the confines of his principles. We all right? And so if I begin to operate outside of those principles, then I become an unrighteous judge. Okay? And let me clarify judgment for a minute. First of all, God is the ultimate judge. There will be a great white throne judgment that will take place, and everybody will be judged in that great white throne judgment. And he is the ultimate judge. But the judge in that sense, the translation of judge in that sense means essentially the finality, the decision. He's the only person that has the ability to condemn, to enact condemnation, to send somebody to the eternal punishment and damnation for their rejection of him. Okay? You and I don't have the ability to tell somebody to go to hell. Okay? All right. And so we don't carry that kind of judgment ability. Are you with me? But what we can't mix up is that you and I are the judges of the earth. Okay? And if you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 with me, you'll see what it says in verse 1. It says, "Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to the law before the unrighteous and not before the saints?" And so what it begins to talk about the law here is that those people who don't understand the law or don't live the law, but they only reference the law as a point of contention with somebody else. You understand what I'm saying? They take a rule and they use that rule to bring up unrighteous judgment against somebody else that they're not even living by themselves. You with me? And so it says, how how dare any of you having a matter against another go to the law and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? Right there casts out every argument whatsoever that you don't have the right to judge me. Well, you're right. I don't have the right to judge you if my lifestyle does not back up the decree that I'm handing out. If I'm not operating under the authenticity of the Spirit of the Lord and in His principles, His righteousness, then no, you're right. I don't have the ability to say anything to you, because then the word begins to bring forth in my life. How dare I ever notice a speck of dust in my brother's eye without first taking out the plank in my own, right? But let's get back to those who are living according to the habits and the ethics and the attitudes of the Lord, all right? It says that, do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world would be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge amongst even the smallest of matters? That's where it separates the issue. Are you unworthy to judge? Not do you have you been granted the delegation to do so, but are you unworthy to do so even in the smallest things? Are you taking care of the details of your life to live according to my mind? If you do so, now you are the judge of the earth. And it says, do you not even know that you shall judge the angels? That even the angels are subject to your judgment. How much more things that pertain then to this life are you judge over? Everybody with me? If then you have judgments concerning things pertaining to this life, do you appoint those who are least esteemed by the church to judge? Now, what it's actually saying here is a cultural reference to people inside the church using the court of law for spiritual judgment rather than actually using their right, living by righteousness to judge. I say this to your shame. It is so that there is not. Basically, let me back up. What it's saying right there is how dare you even go to a court of law to pass judgment when it should be done so righteously in the church? Where should judgment come from? Somebody with me? I'm just talking Bible to you right now. It is so that there is not a wise man among you, not even one, who will be able to judge between his brethren, but brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. And so it's rebuking improper or unrighteous judgment and using law as their basis, but the law not being of effect in their own life. But from a place of righteousness, okay? From a place of righteousness, you and I are the judges of the earth. Matter of fact, we are responsible for being our brother's keeper. We are responsible for holding people accountable to the Word of God. But how dare we ever hold somebody accountable to the Word of God that my life cannot back? All right? And so that's where here's what it says. Here's then you begin to understand Scripture when it says you better judge yourself first. For if you judge yourself first, you won't be judged by God. That's what it says. And if I judge myself first, as Tommy's saying tonight, if you do a heart check tonight and if you evaluate yourself first and you begin to align yourself up with God and you're honest with yourself about who you are, then you have the ability to walk in the delegated authority of God to be the judge of the keeper of the earth. That's how, I'm going to be honest with you here. We you know what we do? We run around and we shout and we talk about having dominion. And the problem with this is that we think in terms of dominion over evil spirits and bad things and all that kind of stuff. We were given dominion over the things pertaining to what we have the ability to see and touch. We also have dominion over the things that our feet tread upon, the spirit realm, but we have been given dominion over the things that we see and touch that are tangible and practical and real in our life. But we can't carry out dominion until I begin to walk in the principle of things myself. We all right with that? Anybody got any questions about that before I move on?
Not a question, just more of a comment. I think it's the attitude by which
we do it by.
The attitude by which we do it by. Are we judging someone to let them know they're wrong? Or are we judging someone to help them realize there's a better way?
Yeah.
So I think it's the attitude of the heart of the judging that we do. Are we doing it so they'll know that we know they're wrong, or we're doing it because we want to help them get better.
I think that's where grace comes into play. And if you go back to what I taught months back about your grace space, that's living inside of the space that God invited you into, which is in His presence. And when we do so, we can judge with grace. You know what I mean? That's so good. I'm so glad Tommy brought this stuff up tonight. So let me move on. E, I'm just kind of touching one little thing here and there. E, ethics. The one thing I want to talk about in ethics that I think we devalue in our culture is work ethic. So I'll just challenge you right now to evaluate how you work on your job. Okay? How you work on your job. Matthew, I believe it's Matthew 25, he begins to talk about those that he distributed talents to. All right, and he gave three of them a different sum of things. Two of them went forward and weren't lazy. They did not have a bad work ethic with what they were given to steward. One held on to it out of fear and was lazy with what God had given them. And because so, the landowner came back and said, here's the problem, is that you were lazy with what I gave you. And so because you were lazy with what I gave you, I'm going to take, you were afraid and you were lazy, and I'm going to take what I did give you and I'm going to give it to somebody else who ain't lazy. And we have to really understand about our work ethic, and that we need to be really conscientious about how we work when we're on our jobs. Because we are, whether you believe it or not, okay, you need to have a good attitude. But let me say this, sometimes you're not even speaking, talking, or looking at anybody, and they're watching you anyway by what you're doing and how well you're doing it. You follow me? And so your work ethic on your job is just as much a testament to your stewardship of what God has given you. Because here's the thing, your supervisor didn't hire you, God did. So you ain't working for your supervisor. Your supervisor is still a lower level subject to him. And so we need to be very conscientious about our work ethic, because our work ethic represents the kingdom. All right? And so I wanted to just bring that up. He brought up attitudes, and then he said something, if I'm not mistaken, in the attitudes. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Your attitude, let me say this. One of the things that helps guide the attitudes is your perspective. And sometimes we have bad attitudes because we limit our perspective. We limit the way we make decisions about situations by only the way that we see them. And we never step back to allow God to teach us the way He sees them. And if we'll really begin to get a God's eye view of the things of our life and have a much broader perspective about what God desires, our attitude may shift a little bit, because you'll realize the situation you're in right now that's a frustration ain't going to be there forever. And it's a part of a bigger plan of what God is developing and shaping for you that's bringing you something exciting. But because you stuck in a limited perspective, you got an attitude about where you're at right now and what you're doing and who you're with. But you're not seeing it for what God is doing with it. I'm doing okay. Right? And so think about that in perspective. Change your perspective may even change your attitude about things. Allow God to change your perspective about things, and it may change your attitude. The next one, relationships, and he brought up a really good one that God began to hammer in my mind. He says something about your relationship with yourself. And this is the thought that came to my mind. How many of you have hope and a desire for better things, for visions and dreams in your life? Who's got a hope and a desire, visions and dreams, things I want to touch, things I want to do? Everybody there, for the most part, you have this anticipation of an expected future, of something being better than it is now. Everybody's in that place. Let me show you something. This is just what God said. You can't expect visions and dreams to swell from a mindset that hates the wellspring of those things. What'd you say? I will. So everything that you will do in your life, everything that you will ever be, everything that you will ever touch, all right, is located in this thing called destiny. Your destiny is not found somewhere, it's discovered in here. Everything that you will ever be was created in you before you were born. It's a matter of living life to steward the relationship with God that we have, arriving at maturation moments in our faith that reveal the greater things of us. Are we all right? And so here's the thing is that you can't beg for water and hate the well that it comes from. Because if you hate the well it comes from, you'll never get close enough to it to know there's water in it. I'm trying. How do you dare hate yourself when God has locked your destiny inside of the thing that you hate? There's nothing wrong with wanting to be better. That's God's desire for our life, is that we're growing in maturity of Christ. So it should be a desire of ours and a pursuit of ours that we're growing to better ourselves every day. But your better ought to come out of a love for yourself and a love for Him, not out of a hate for self. That you don't like the way you look, the way the way you whatever, the way you appear, the way you do things, whatever else it may be. You can't hate on what God is really, what God is really built to be the gem. He sees you as a jewel in His crown, and you're hating on the very thing that God calls precious. You're literally standing against God. You're literally standing against God when you're casting down the very here. I'm just be truthful with you. It's futile to pray and fast and believe and even plan for a better future and hate the very thing that future comes from. Do you believe in the principle of sowing and reaping? Do you believe that principle is true to the way it was established in the order of the kingdom? That though as a man reaps, though as a man sows, he shall also reap. That you can't reap a different harvest than what you sowed for. Will you agree with me that that's a principle of our kingdom, established by God? That's a principle that even God Himself is bound by. It's an order in the kingdom. It's a decree. And so here's the thing. Is that you can't sow hatred and bitterness and rage and all of these things that you see and think about yourself and expect to reap a beautiful future. I feel like I ain't getting no help. And so I'm just here to tell you have to understand, and we have been, I don't even know how to paint this picture. We have been thrust in a culture that at the same time it wants us to celebrate and promote ourselves, it does so in a double mindset of teaching us to hate ourselves at the same time. Can you see what I'm saying right now? I don't even know how to get it out and explain it, but I'm trying to show you the picture that I see in my mind. It's wanting us to promote ourselves. It's selfie central right now. You with me? It's all about promoting self, but really secretly hating what you're promoting. Because our whole lifestyle is the reason. The reason it wants you to promote yourself is because there's a spirit out there waiting to create comparison. To lock you in a mindset that you begin to hate what you see because you're looking at at everybody else. And so it's now you have to understand, it's why God said, love me with everything and then love you. And then from there, do you even have the ability to cultivate right relationships that produce things in your life? Because here's the thing, is that nothing happens in our life separate from being connected to somebody. Okay? Doors only open through people. You don't open your own doors. Doors open through people. You with me? But here's the thing, is that I can't arrive at a proper relationship to a door opening for me to have a better future if I don't love myself first, because I can't properly enter into that relationship with somebody else while I got hate for myself. It's a principle of the kingdom. It said, love Him with everything and then love you. And out of that, can you love other people? I'm all right. Do you see how this thing, it hijacks our future? And we don't even see it. Because we think as long as we praying enough, it's all going to happen. Well, what good is your praying if you ain't learned to love you? God loves you. For God so loved you. Right? That he gave. And so I have to begin to see myself and love myself with that kind of hope and expectation that although I might not, I have been taught. Here, let me tell you guys this. You have been taught by somebody or by something outside of you to hate what you see in the mirror. Now, again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't want to be healthy in your body. You know what I'm saying? That you shouldn't want to be healthy in your mind and healthy in your spirit. But let's just look at this thing from a physical standpoint for a minute, okay? We have been taught that this looks good and this does not. And it ain't got nothing to do with health. You know what I'm saying? You can be this big, this tall, this whatever, this short, whatever it may be, and be healthy as all get out and be a string bean over here and be just as tore up inside as you can be. Right? So we've been taught by something outside of us to hate what we see. And we need, and it should be out here. The love, the self development and the self investment should come out of a place of a passionate love for God. That we give him permission to evaluate who we are, because he's not going to just point out the fact that, oh, you know what, you need to exercise a little bit more and get your heart health right, because he's also going to say, but this is how you need to exercise in the spirit to get your heart right. And he's going to really evaluate the whole picture. But he's going to do it out of a place that he sees what he's put in you that's so much better than what you touch right now. If you don't start loving that thing, you ain't going to touch it. I'm just going to be honest with you. You ain't going to touch it. It's going to be futility. You're going to live a cycle of praying and believing for more and never touching it because you hate where it's coming from. And then the last thing, this time. And this I hope this helps you out right here. How many of you work a job that you're not your own boss? Raise your hand high. If you work a job that you're not your own boss, how many of those places that you work have some kind of an internet or social media policy? Raise your hand if they have some kind of an internet or social media or browsing time, like you're limited to how much you can be on a computer, or if you can at all, or whatever else. All right? And so here's what I say about your time. Our just like we talked about being lazy up here a minute ago with our stewardship on our job. This whole social media thing, internet in general, but social media is what we're living now. We have to be very aware of the way the enemy is using it. You know, everything that's ever been an idea birthed in the earth came from heaven. The enemy just perverted it. Okay? And so we have to be very aware and very conscientious about this thing. And so if I'll just simply say this with your time. If your job has a social media policy or an internet policy that limits how much you can be on a personal phone or a personal computer or browsing on the internet or whatever else, because when you step outside of the boundaries, essentially what are you doing? You're robbing from company time. And that's why they have that. They have it so you don't do foolish things, but they also have it because you're robbing from the time that they're paying you for, right? You're wasting their time. You're wasting their money because you're wasting their time. So let me back up and say this. Everything that was instituted in the natural also has a spiritual principle to it. And if you have a social media policy in your natural job, don't you know there's a social media policy in your spiritual job? And you may leave your job at 5 o'clock and spend the next 3 hours sitting on your couch on Facebook and not think nothing's wrong with it because you're in your own house and you can do whatever you want to do. The problem is you have violated the social media time policy on the one who really employs you. We all right? Because who were you hired by first? Okay? And so it's just like anything else. Tommy said, I'm not saying don't have hobbies, don't take vacations, don't, but everything has to be done so in the balance and the leading of the Holy Spirit. And I would tell you to be very conscientious, because he's right. This is people and time are the most precious commodities that we have. All right, time is really big, and if you understand the context of the way things are laid out in the kingdom, you have been given a timeline essentially that your life was promised. Your timeline is associated with your why or your cause, your purpose. God is extremely good about stewardship. He knows, and he allows for no room for anything to be wasted. So he knows the time it would take in your life to fulfill your purpose. Okay? And so he's very wise about that. And that's why it is but a vapor, because eternally will be around forever. But there's a reason on earth that you've been given a moment, a season for, to accomplish what God put inside of you. That can't go wasted. All right? That can't go wasted. And so he cares a lot about this time, because the time that we waste transgressing our social media policy on our boss is time that we're losing. Not, I mean, you can call me what you want. This is just the truth. Not even from the standpoint of time that we're losing in who we can affect and how we can affect. Yes, you're losing that too. But you're literally losing days off of your life. I'm just being honest with you. You're literally losing days off of your life, because the timeline of your life is tied to your reason. And any time that I'm not saying that every moment of God understands who we are. He understands the culture that we live in. I'm not saying that you can't take a vacation. I'm not saying you can't relax for 30 minutes. I'm not saying you can't go to the bathroom and sit on the toilet for 5 minutes and carry your phone and play a game. I ain't saying that, and he's aware of that. Everybody laughing because everybody does it. I'm just telling you that don't start it on the toilet and keep going at it for the next 2 hours at your desk, and then you pick it back up for the next hour and a half first thing when you get home, and you're literally robbing the reason of your life. We can't sit here and beg for our purpose and then not give ourselves to it. We can't do it. And so, I challenge you with kind of one little thing. Tommy, I didn't mean to rob. That's why I like the team. That's why I like the team stuff, man. I just bouncing ideas. I think that, I know it sounds like I'm being somewhat foolish when I talk about this phones and social media and stuff like that, but um, we have to be very conscientious about how much time we give to those things. And because there's so much more to do for the kingdom of God, and even just discovering self. Do you give as much time to reading leadership books and the books that are connected to your passion and your gifts as you do the internet? Do you, I'm not trying to promote myself, but do you give yourself, as much time going back over to what God spoke on Sunday or on Wednesday to help cultivate that and grow more in the wisdom and the knowledge of that? Or is Sunday, when it's over with, it's done? How many times? Why do you think you open up your Facebook, and what have they done with their algorithms? You see the same post for probably the next 8 hours. You'll see that a heavy couple of pictures or posts. It understands the importance of repetition. Put that down and start getting some repetition in the word, or getting some repetition from what was taught, or getting some repetition from what's God stirring in you and your passions and your desires. Put down the fact that Johnny just got a new dog. Who gives a crap? Good for you, Johnny, but the truth is man, I like it and I move on, whatever I got to do, but I got to go dig in and invest in me. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm done. Tommy, you better close.